Priority projects update. Ed Silvas is ill today, was not in the office, unfortunately couldn't be here, so Dr. Jack Annette is going to step in.
Yes, only with a toe or two, not entirely on the full line. They've had a lot of detail on all of these projects, and we had discussions last week that he was prepared to present this item to you. So I will do my best to cover what we have, but I don't know how far we can go into detailed questions. He has prepared for you a report which reviews and summarizes the status of of all of the projects thus far related to both what we call Fund 40, the Pulte funds, and then the Prop 39, some of the Prop 39 funding issues, but most of this is Pulte. And the projects that you see before you on those pages have been grouped together by those completed, and then we have a group that are in progress, and then we have some that are authorized but at various states of completion. You can see his summary at the end, which also indicates the total for the funds that have been allocated, those that have been paid to date, and the balance remaining, along with a small reserve that's there, with a balance a little over $9 million still to be completed. The backup pages contain site-by-site listings of the projects. And then, this is basically put together so you can have a perspective on all of the projects, the status of them, as well as the budgeting for them. So, that's kind of a summary.
Comments, questions from the board? If we get too detailed on this, Ed's not here. We'll have to get some questions answered by him.
The other piece to this is you're listening to this report in advance of the next report on the Terra Verde project, which lends some financial insight into the budgetary issues, gives you some context for it. But it also contains information on those projects that are still pending. And obviously, it shows you the status of those projects that the task force talked about, worked on, but have not yet been funded or approved. So you know, in terms of making future plans, where you might want to consider going.
Questions or comments from the board?
Are the board authorized projects all scheduled to be done this summer, basically?
No.
Yeah. Are these, or is it a mix of some?
It's a mix. It's a mix. And if you look on each set of projects, it's a whole variety, and it says where they're at. If they're in progress, not completed, if they haven't been approved,
right,
or if they're in the
right. Well, the not approved, obviously.
Right. Yeah.
One thing that my recollection is that we have approved the boiler replacement projects throughout the district. And this is kind of showing them as being not approved if you go back into the details. So do you know the question I should be asking Ed?
Yes, that would be one. But again, I don't have that record here in front of me. But he might remember it.
I don't have your document there, but there are some boiler replacements that are part of the Prop 39 program that has been approved for funding.
Like page 136, line 20? With Prop 39.
Okay, yeah. So there have been some, and the RFP for that is going to be going out in the next week or so.
Thank you.
Yeah. You see that?
Yeah, I do. I just noticed when I have to go through here, like on page 138, line 16, it says replace 3 hot water boilers, City Hollow, not approved. It does say Prop 39 funds. Okay, so that, we just need clarity, because I thought we
Yes.
already approved all of that.
We can clarify that for you.
And the Wagner Ranch Nature Area, I know that's a garden there. But
I believe so, yes.
where is that? It's on the summary page, first in the in progress section, this is not the line number. This is WRNA in the middle there.
I don't remember approving that. So, you know, we probably should have this on the agenda again when Ed is back.
Yes, we can do that.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea, because we should probably talk about all these things some more. And regarding Wagner, I know they're still gonna do the resurfacing up part of the playground and the fence,
Yes.
I think, this summer.
Yes.
Are they still having summer school there, or how's that gonna work?
Yes, we do have summer school for Wagner Town.
Yeah,
Yes.
at Wagner,
Yeah.
and so it's not a problem to
Shouldn't be.
have it there, even
No.
though they're doing that
He was aware of that.
project? Okay.
I'd just like to see this brought back, I mean, not just because of Ed, but for have, you know, us have another facilities discussion. Because, you know, we obviously have some really big ticket items that we need to figure out, or even just like the exterior painting, the interior
Right.
painting, things like that, you know, school sites would love to have, that we haven't approved yet.
We anticipated that even after this report, and even if Ed was here, we would be coming back to it again because of that very fact that there would be other projects you'd want to discuss. And so if any of you want to highlight any of those now that you're interested in, then we can, you know, also give him a heads up on those.
Well, I mean, I guess once we get, you know, the boiler piece, I wanted clarity on painting for sure. And a lot of these not approved items I'd like us to be looking at. And then the other big piece that, I know I had asked for, you know, some sort of presentation on was the portable replacement, and whether, you know, replacing those really old portables. I think we had like, I remember the number 8 or 9, really old ones that we had talked about, these are replacing with new portables. Some sort of feedback or something like that, so I'd like to not drop the ball on that. Moving forward on seeing what our options are. We can talk about air conditioning.
Yes, that's the next item.
Yeah. Air conditioning and solar options, working on this.
Well, I know there's a whole history to this, but just to understand it, will there be a time that we want to just go through the list of not approved projects together? Is that the?
Yes, that's what we would see. Our purpose this time was to identify them for you.
Okay.
And then to the extent that, you know, you wanted to discuss those and give any direction, but you probably need your questions answered on them before you do it.
Okay.
Well, also, just as a reminder, we have the facilities task force, which
Right.
identified sort of principles of priority. So we should be looking at that when we look at the list again, because, you know, they had all those meetings and we came up with some statements about how to prioritize the facilities projects.
And Joe, do we, is it the sense that we're already pretty booked up with all we could do for this coming summer?
Well, it kind of depends on the project, where it's at, and, you know, any overlap with other projects that are scheduled. So not necessarily, but the time to get into it, if it isn't already in here and in process, probably would be restricted if it had to go out to bid and if it had to go through DSA. Those are two limiting factors that, you know, they're small things, that doesn't necessarily be the case, but large projects, and particularly those that would have to go through a DSA approval, would probably not be able to happen this summer.
I think it would be nice for us to have another
Yeah.
session.
Well, also, one thing I'm not sure is on here, which we talked about very early on in the facilities, was the part of technology that could fall under facilities, the built-in wiring or whatever.
Yes.
And I feel like we should also be kind of revisiting, is there any additional switches or whatever it is that's built in that maybe could come out of these funds? You know, now that Raymond's here, I hope that we can ask him if he sees anything like that.
Yeah, those discussions have happened, and of course, take note of the completed projects that are funded on technology. If you look on the bottom of that list, there are several million, well, over a
What
million.
project?
Yeah.
Which page?
First page.
First page, first
Summary-
server
summary page.
virtualization of the OIS wireless cabling and switch upgrade.
And some of those funds, there are balances remaining there. And Raymond is working on several of those and preparing specs to go out to bid on some of those projects.
Right, okay. Yeah, well, I just think it's important because, yeah. And does this include anything that deals with the bandwidth? I mean, I'm not a tech person, so I don't know.
Yeah, so that last item under completed projects, OIS wireless cabling and switch upgrades, that deals with bandwidth. That's $719,000 on it. They're starting to address it.
Oh, okay, so then it's not completed. Are they gonna be able to do a lot?
It's completed. We just haven't written all the checks.
Oh, it is completed, okay.
Completed project.
But the phone server, we haven't done that.
Phone server has to go out to bid. It hasn't gone out yet. It's being prepared and worked on.
Okay, is that something that might happen this summer?
That was the original plan, so I know the specifications and so forth, so we'll see.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any comments from the public on this item?
Yes, Charles Shannon, OEA President. In looking over the project list, I'm noticing that the air conditioning and the dual pane windows are not on there. And I just want to say that our members really want to see a comfortable climate that's conducive for learning. And we're not seeing any real progress on that. So we look forward to hearing that there's going to be progress on that for those warm months. And we're seeing more and more of those happen with our drought situation and global warming. So we look forward to seeing that. So we just don't want to lose sight of it. So I want to keep bringing that up. Thank you.
Well, let's make sure we understand that's the next agenda item.
Yep.
I also, to go
But it's
back
on the
to,
project list. I just want to mention it said not,
that's why it's
Yeah.
because it's the next agenda item.
okay.
I saw Raymond back there, which I knew he was here somewhere, but I didn't see him to address the status of the phone system work. The question was, Raymond, on going out to bid for those public address system, things related to the phones.
Yes, so we are currently doing a review of our existing network design, and so prior to going to bid for that new paging system, we're looking at the existing design of our network and looking at what we can do to redesign it, and then sort of implementing that into the project bid.
And the timeline for that?
We're looking at wrapping up our network review by the middle of next month, and so we'll be working on putting out a bid by the end of next month.
Thank you.
Anything else from the board? Okay, that item was on for discussion only. I'm gonna public comment on this item. Any other public
I
comment?
gave you a card, I don't know if
Sorry,
it's the
thank
right
you.
time.
Thank you, Alana.
Okay, I'm Alana Spindler, I'm a teacher's assistant at the Wagner Ranch Nature Area. I'd just like to say that I'm thrilled that, we had a couple of items that we had hoped would be included in the facilities that would benefit our area. And they were a roof over our kitchen area, our outdoor kitchen, to protect from the rain on the rainy days, and then also a toilet facility for the nature area. We are thrilled that the district has decided to give us a roof in the kitchen area, but we would really like to encourage the board and the district to reconsider this toilet facility. It takes a lot of time for the kids to go over to the gym. It's disruptive to the program, and it would be really nice if we could have that included.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, thank you. This item is for discussion only. We're going to, we've got a couple parents here for one item on the agenda with children. And out of respect for that, I'd like, if the board's okay with it, I'd like to move item E up and have it be our next item for discussion. Any objection?
No.
Okay. So Rick, thank you for your patience. We're going to move to item E, agreement for child safety and awareness services between the Child Abuse Prevention Council of Contra Costa County and the Moraga, Lafayette, and Orinda School District. Kathy Marshall.
So before you tonight is a memorandum, well, it's an agreement actually, that is a renewal. It's a renewal for an agreement that the board approved just about 2 years ago for a 2-year program. And the 2-year program was a partnership with the Child Safety, Child Abuse Prevention Council of Contra Costa County, the Lafayette School District, and the Moraga School District. It was the first time that we went into partnership to deliver instruction to students in the classroom in identified grades. And those grades are grades 1, 3, 5, and 6. And the focus of the instruction is on providing age-appropriate tools and strategies to students in preventing child abuse, sexual harassment, bullying, including cyberbullying. And so through the process over the past 2 years, we have had a steering committee that is comprised of representatives from each district who has selected the curriculum, monitored the curriculum, evaluated the program. We've had 3 reports to the board in the initial stages and at the end of last year. And the agreement, supposedly, it ends this June. And so work has taken place through the steering committee to look at how best to continue the program. We are interested in bringing this agreement forward. Again, the same agreement, 2 years, the same grades, grades 1, 3, 5, and 6, and the curriculum with continuous and ongoing monitoring of its implementation. So this agreement is for approval to continue with the program as we have done so in the past. There's no expansion at this time. What we've learned over the course of the 2 years is that every student in Orinda now has had instruction on these particular critical topics. They have been with the same instructor through the Child Abuse Prevention Council, who is trained and who has received feedback and support from the steering committee and from all of our teachers through the implementation process. Our teachers also are provided with follow-up activities, and what we implemented this year was getting communication out to the parents early on and more communication. So even prior to lesson implementation, we implemented getting all the strategies and what the topics were that students would be learning in the classroom to the parents ahead of time, so that when they picked up their students, they would know exactly what to say, how was your day, and tell me about this, and have some strategies for continuing those conversations. So at this time, Carol Carrillo, the Executive Director of the Child Abuse Prevention Council, is here to respond to questions. But I wanted to let you know that the agreement in front of you, the most important changes are the years from a previous agreement that we've had. And the cost for the program is based on enrollment for each district. And we are going to be basing it on the enrollment from the census day, which is the first Wednesday in October. That's a standard day that is used for calculating funding for districts. So that would be based on the enrollment that is calculated on that day. And then it would be determined, and you'll see in your agenda bill what that cost is. Our previous contract and agreement was $30 a student, so it's up a little bit since the last time. And these are based on the estimated projections of students in those particular grades.
Any questions from the board?
Yes, I have some questions. You mentioned, thank you Kathy for presenting this. You mentioned that the goal was that the committee met with the goal of how best to continue the program. I just want to say, I don't feel that I was ever convinced why we needed the program and whether this program is the best thing for our students. So I'm not interested in knowing how we can continue the program. Obviously, we can continue the agreement, but of course, we want to do what we must do, but I understand we are mandated to educate our teachers in mandated reporting, but we aren't mandated to teach our children about child abuse. Of course, we don't want them in a compromised position, but I think it's really important how we go about these subjects, and I'm not convinced that this is actually what we want to be doing. And I just want to say, as a board, our job is for oversight, and we are responsible for the curriculum. That is one of the areas that is our responsibility. And we never approved the curriculum for this program. We just agreed to hire an organization to do this program. So I feel there's a missing piece here in that we had no input on the curriculum. And that's, so I'm not prepared to want to continue this, especially in this manner. So that's all I want to say right now.
I have some very strong feelings about this program, and I want to first say it's my understanding, I was not on the board at the time, it's my understanding that this partnership was developed in response to a situation in another school district where there was a series of sexual improprieties on behalf of the teachers with young women, and these were reported not properly. They were reported to a principal, and these were denied and weren't dealt with properly. And so that's my understanding of the history of this program. If that understanding is correct, this is the wrong program for the wrong reasons. This is an area of my expertise. I've had thousands of hours of training as a mandated reporter. I have worked with programs with children in foster care and all over the state. I have attended national conferences led by the Child Welfare League of America. I am currently a mandated reporter as a court-appointed special advocate for children who are in foster care. And here's what I know. Children do not report their own abuse. And if this program is directed at helping children to learn what abuse is and to report their own abuse, it's just wrong-headed. Children do not report their own abuse for a number of reasons. Mostly, the abuser is a person of power over those children, and this is our secret, and if you tell, I'm going to be in big trouble, and therefore you will be in big trouble. Another common reason that children do not report their own abuse is that if they're being abused at the hands of their parents, they love their parents, they're confused about this, they don't want to talk to anybody about it, and they don't want their parents taken away from them. I've been given permission to talk about a particular incident that I think is quite disturbing and has caused a great deal of trauma to one particular family in this district. It was a third grade child who reported that there was a picture, a nude picture in his house. This picture was not a secret, it was in a coffee table book, and it was an art picture. And this the agency conducting this program erroneously believed that this was a reportable offense. When they called Child Welfare Services, CPS told them that this was not a reportable offense, so then they called the police. And this is just highly improper. You report to Child Welfare Services because they look at this from a family maintenance perspective. They don't want to take a parent away from a child. They don't want to traumatize a family. They want to maintain the family. You call the police and they look at it from a criminal perspective, and it's just wrong-headed. The more important thing that we can do to protect our children is to adequately and completely train our teachers in their duties as mandated reporters and teach them what is and is not a reportable offense, how to recognize the signs of child abuse, consistent breaks of bones, cigarette burns on a body, a child is cutting, repeated injuries for no explanation. And you teach the teachers to call Family Protective Services, not the police. And you teach the teachers that they are to be protected and there will be no repercussion for their reporting properly. This is just approaching the situation from the wrong end. If we want to have a program that trains children, this is not the right program. There are other programs that approach the situation from a secret keeping kind of approach with age-appropriate terminology. You don't approach a third grader to teach them about pornography. It's not something they can possibly understand. As you can tell, I have very strong feelings about it. This is just the wrong program for the wrong reason. And I don't want to see it renewed.
Thank you. Anything else to the board?
Well, I do have questions, and I should first say thank you and an apology to Carol, thank you for sharing your perspective on that, and thank you for Carol from the program for being here, which I hope we can hear from, if appropriate, during discussion. And then sorry also to you, Kathy, I feel like we're saying this all the time to new board members. You described that there's been a steering committee that spent time looking through reports. And there, as you described in your memo, there have been student and parent surveys, and that's shaped the curriculum. I think given what we've heard here on the board, just like we've done with kindergarten, the board needs to hear a little bit about that, and maybe repetitive to some of the board members who were here, but I certainly would like to hear about how the curriculum was shaped by the experience of the last year, what other options were considered as a practical matter, and then as a legal matter, just sharing individually. It's similar to what Carol was saying. I do want to understand better the responsibility to teach children about what's happened with teachers versus what's happened in families. And I think that has raised concerns in the community about the school's role in doing that.
Sure. So, would you like to hear from Carol or from me? Maybe. Carol, why don't we tag team? Okay. This is Carol Carrillo, and she's the executive director of our partnership program here. And she has also been one of the leads on the steering committee as well. And with regard to the curriculum, she can talk a little bit more about the research and that it's research-based and the decisions that came with regard to that curriculum, primarily being age-appropriate and giving students the confidence to feel safe and to find a safe adult to talk to for the very reasons that we heard that students might not speak up. And then as far as the steering committee goes, they don't just meet to evaluate a continuing agreement. We really analyze the surveys. We do the surveys after each grade level session. And so we are in the process right now of collecting the surveys, and we don't have a complete set yet. We have 6th grade and 5th grade, 3rd grade is coming in, and 1st grade lessons will begin this month or starting, so we don't have those as of yet. But following each session, we do collect the parent surveys, and it is from those surveys that we have really looked at primarily the communication about the program, and a thought is given into every comment as to what can be done to improve that process.
Kathy, who do those surveys, where are those surveys turned in?
They go directly to Carol's agency.
I think that's kind of a conflict of interest. I think they should come to us.
Well, I think they can. You will have to then manage that process through the survey process.
Yeah, I agree. I think the surveys should come to us. If we're evaluating the program, we want to be getting the surveys. Kathy could get them directly. Also regarding the surveys, I don't know if Jason's aware, the committee and the surveys were done by all three, Moraga, Lafayette, and Orinda.
Okay.
So, you know, so this committee is from all three districts. We're basically outnumbered in fact, because unless, you know, we got Moraga and Orinda to agree with us, I mean, Moraga and Lafayette, you know, it's a group of 3 districts. I had some other concerns about the surveys in that the survey results, and Jason, when you asked about it, I realized you probably don't have the information. You know, we approved this originally January 2013. So there's been surveys from last June and from, I think, the fall, where there was some changes to the curriculum based on the surveys. All that information should be given to all the board members, since we have 2 new board members. They should get those copies, but we did not actually get all of the survey results. We got a summary of survey results, which I brought up last June, and I would like to have all of the survey results as opposed to just the summary. You know, it said 4 people said this, 5 people said that. You know, I would rather the actual survey results. So.
In response to the question regarding requirements for the program, there is the mandated reporting training that is a requirement for staff, and that is separate. This is in our sexual harassment policy, and along with new guidelines through the Office of Civil Rights. It states that we are to provide information and instruction that's appropriate for students to know how to report. And so that is what we are attempting to address in an age-appropriate manner. And the partnership developed primarily because it's a complex topic for teachers often who are not trained in that manner with the questions that students can bring up to do on their own. And so it was an opportunity 2 years ago to develop this partnership to work with others that are trained in this field to help us deliver that instruction. And so that was really the groundwork for us looking at entering into this agreement 2 years ago.
But I think our board, the requirement is that to provide children with age-appropriate information regarding sexual harassment in the educational setting.
Yes.
Right? So I mean, I guess my question for you, maybe for you, Carol, is, you know, my sense of the program, and this might be an incorrect sense, is that it focuses more on child abuse wherever it may take place and less on the sexual, I mean, I know it's, you know, sexual harassment includes sexual abuse, so it's a little bit of an overlap, and there is that aspect of it, but it seems like the law is more focused on, you know, educating children about sexual harassment at school, and that the program focuses a lot on just child abuse in a more global sense, and is that appropriate for us to be doing at the school sites?
Actually, it doesn't just focus on child abuse and child abuse prevention. The program was researched 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when we entered into this partnership. It is a best practice model. It is an appropriate model for students 1st through 6th grade. It does cover child abuse prevention, but we also talk about bullying and sexual harassment prevention. Children are in other programs, not just at school, but they're in city programs, they are in Little League programs, and they really do need a skill set, to build a skill set to keep themselves safe, not just in school, but in other aspects of their life. And this program is designed to do that. It is a current model. It was developed around 2012, and it's based on research, and it's based on best practice around child abuse prevention, and so that was why we chose that program. The steering committee did work with us to research programs and to choose this program because it is a best practice model and it is a current model around dealing with these issues. We also talk about social media issues now, and prevention and some of the strategies around how to keep yourself safe in those aspects as well. So we have, over the last 2 years, really listened to our school staff, our parents, and the kids in the program, and really tweak the program to meet those needs and to do a better job of delivering this program. So I disagree with Carol. I know that you are the expert here, and I appreciate your expertise. I too am a social worker. I've worked in the field of child welfare for 30 years. I do know mandated reporting, and I do know that children will tell a safe adult if something is happening in their life that makes them feel unsafe and uncomfortable. And I can tell you that it is happening here. There are reports that have come out of the fact that we have this program here. Our Children's Interview Center 2 weeks ago just told me about a child that was brought to the center, that was interviewed, and from Orinda, and that yes, indeed, she was being sexually abused and that there were multiple victims. So we are making a difference. I know this is a tough subject. I know it's really hard to talk about, but we do want parents to be our partner. We want our school staff to be our partner and parents to be our partner in working to keep our kids safe. Because it is a reality. It is a reality that our kids need to learn how to be able to tell someone that something happening in their life that makes them uncomfortable. Kids will do that. They will tell.
Maybe it would help us if we got to see a piece of, I have a 3rd grade daughter, so she participated, and I happened to have her and her friend in the car with me after, I guess, they had this session, and they told me about it, and they giggled and said it was weird. That was sort of their comment. So maybe I didn't read the materials well enough to know how to handle, I read the materials that were provided to me, but, maybe we as a board need to see a little bit more of what the program is.
I'd like to know too more about the education, the background, and the number of hours of training the trainer has had. How many hundreds of hours has she been trained in this kind of presentation and work? And what is her educational background?
Well, her educational background is she is an educator and she has worked with students. I don't have her resume in front of me, but I know she's had many years of teaching students around healthcare issues. She has my agency and the expertise of myself and the agency that backing her as she's teaching this program. She has gone through the training through Child Help USA, who developed this program, and this program was vetted by Arizona State University and was piloted in the state of Florida throughout the whole state. So it does have, has been vetted, and it is proven to be an appropriate child abuse prevention, sexual harassment, and bullying curriculum for students.
How many hours training
she probably had about 20 hours on the particular curriculum, and she now has taught that curriculum for 2 years. I would love for you to come and see one of the sessions. I don't think that we can have like 6 people sitting in there, but to take turns and have the board come and see a session, come and see a first grade session, come and see 3rd, 5th, and 6th grade, and get a sense of really what it is we're doing. I think it's really hard to understand this. This is a tough topic, but I think if you come in and see it being taught, you will see that it is age appropriate. It's fun. Kids learn in a fun manner. The curriculum is also on our website, so you can look at the specifics of the curriculum. And maybe even come to a steering committee meeting and listen to the school staff and the parents.
I would love to.
Sir.
I feel so excluded. Okay, she stopped.
Just don't,
No,
All right.
I really didn't.
you're interrupting.
I would love
I'm
for,
so sorry.
She didn't stop, so calm down.
Okay,
Settle
I
down.
just had to say, I'm so sorry.
the school staff and the parents on that steering committee support this program. I can't tell you how many of your school staff have said to us that they appreciate this program and that they too indeed have had to make reports based on what kids have said and what they've learned from this program. And they are substantiated reports, so.
Carol, I just think the issue is that the trainer obviously does not fully understand what is a reportable offense and what is not. And if CPS themselves tell her this is not a reportable offense, they're the ones that really have to follow up on that. And as a social worker, I think that you should know that.
You know, I disagree with you. I think that what we're taught as mandated reporters is to get to reasonable suspicion. We are not to investigate, we are not to ask a lot of questions, and we are to report. It is up to the police and Children and Family Services to do the investigation. That's the position we take. I know that you know that as a mandated reporter. That is what we train all of our mandated reporters to do. It's out of our hands once the report is made. So,
But you know the law. I sent you that law. Pornography is not reportable, and it says so in the law. It's not reportable. Social Services is totally uninterested in nude photographs unless children are involved in those photographs. You know.
that's part of what they do, that's part of their investigation, to determine whether or not it is a child abuse offense. That's not our job. That's not your job as a mandated reporter, and it's not our job as a mandated reporter. That's Children and Family Services and the police's job to investigate suspected child abuse reports. So we actually did follow the law. We follow the law on every report that we make, and we follow the law when we teach our mandated reporters how to get to reasonable suspicion and how to report suspected child abuse. So we do that, and we've been doing it for over 30 years. So I think you and I probably have to come to a point where we agree to disagree at some point, but you have to know that what we are doing is in the best interest of the kids in our community, and that we are doing this to protect kids, and that should be our focus. How to protect kids should be our focus here.
It is my focus, and we can agree to disagree. I just don't agree that this is the right program for our district.
Kathy, when would we get the survey results from this year?
Have them in May, right?
Well, we haven't done first grade yet, so yeah, it'll be.
We'll have 6th, 5th, and 3rd, probably within the next few weeks, but first grade wouldn't be till the end of May.
Sarah, did you have anything you want to say?
Yeah, you said we could come to the steering committee. I would love to come to your steering committee meeting. I have not been invited. You mentioned the website. I mean, I don't know if you realize how little is in this board packet. Yes, I've been on the board 2 years. I'm more familiar, but we've got 2 new board members who haven't. There's no curriculum mentioned. There's no website mentioned here. There's no surveys from the past. I feel like this information is completely inadequate for us to address this, even for a discussion item. And it just kind of offends me that we've had issues and then all we get is an agreement for continuing the program where we've had complaints from parents and issues about this. So, I mean, I'm, quite upset at seeing this, honestly. But aside from that, I haven't changed my opinion about the program. I'm not convinced that this program is what we need. I mean, you know, you can say what you just said about nude pictures. Somebody could have a painting on the wall with a nude person in it. A child could say, yes, I saw something, a nude person in my house. That doesn't mean we, you know, I mean, I don't know. I just don't feel comfortable having a program where kids are gonna get, you know, the police called for seeing a nude, you know, whether it's a painting or a photograph in a book or whatever in their house. I just think that's way invasion of personal, you know, I don't have the right words for it, but that's not where we need to address in our schools for our parents. That's becoming an invasion of family values, in my opinion.
But I don't know if you can evaluate the entire program based on one
Well, no, but we're
incident instead of looking at the
no, well,
actual
she
program
just
and what
said,
they're
you know,
teaching.
what defines pornography and what do they need to report? I think that it sounds like if a situation like that came up again, the same thing would happen again. And why do we want to continue having a program where we're going to be, you know, addressing these things that aren't really just about education? We just don't have enough information. If we had all the information and we analyzed this thoroughly and we came up with the conclusion that yes, let's go ahead, that's fine. But just to be given an agreement to renew this when we've had these issues, I just find this very upsetting. I just have to say it.
Even before I read the curriculum, before I was on the board, before I read the curriculum, I'm not objecting to the program from one incident. I object philosophically to the idea of a public school teaching children what constitutes sexual child abuse. Sexual harassment is one thing.
But the definition of sexual harassment, if you look at our board policy, includes
Right.
sexual abuse.
So
how do you say, okay, well, we'll skip that section if that's part of the legal requirement?
I just think this is the wrong program. I think that we meet our responsibilities best when we train the teachers to recognize what isn't abuse. And when
But that doesn't deal with the education piece to the students, that deals with training our teachers,
Right.
which is a different piece. I'm just saying, like, it
Yeah.
sounds like we do have to do something based on these new legal requirements, so.
Does every school district have a program like this where they're teaching the kids? I don't think so.
Well, can I ask a question in that regard? Because Carol, you mentioned that, and I can imagine the steering committee did a lot of thought into this program. It sounds like there are other models than the ASU Florida model. I don't know if you've worked in them before, and you may have, or if the committee considered them, but could we get a flavor of what a different model or emphasis is like?
There really isn't an updated model. This is a model that was designed to deliver in school, so it is the most appropriate model. We're actually just expanded the program at Coronado Elementary School in Richmond. We are meeting with the school staff and the superintendent and the PTA presidents in San Ramon in 2 weeks. They are looking at bringing the program to their district as well as Walnut Creek. So it is a model that is developed and based to deliver in the classroom, to students in the classroom. And it is the only model that is designed to do that.
It's the only model available.
Yep.
Designed
Yeah.
to do that. So the
Yeah.
question is, do we need to do that? Because why wouldn't everyone else be doing it if it was so important to do it? And if it's so
Well,
important, why are we only doing every other grade? You know, that just begs the question, well, wait a minute.
This is the PowerPoint that is on our website. I will send you the link in the board update as to how to access it. It's on the parent education page and it's from our parent meeting. And we also have the link to all of the lessons as well. So we try to keep it up there for parents to be able to review it.
But I guess where I was going with that question, to understand, because I've seen the materials and this model, is if there are other models. In other words, it sounds like the steering committee considered different approaches to meeting our obligations, both in our policy and under the civil rights guides. And I just want to understand if there are different emphases or models.
I believe there are. I think there's a model from an organization in Santa Cruz that is teaching nationally. I can't remember their name right now. I learned of it when I was out of the country. I would be happy to investigate that.
Carol, you were about to comment on that? No, okay.
I don't remember.
Okay, sorry.
Anything else from the board? Want to go to public comment on this?
I'm remembering that we got some information from Simon about Kid Power. Kid Power is something that an organization that does a newsletter on topics like this that actually I took my daughter to when she was in preschool. And they had a program at Glorietta, I can't remember, it was Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts, when one of my kids were there that I went to. That was very good, and all the parents really liked it. And the kids, one of those kids and a parent goes together kind of thing. But I think their approach is very different, and what Simon was talking about, teaching the kids the skills to deal with situations, and I think that's a really healthy thing to do. They have great programs, so just wanted to say that.
Anything else on the board?
I'll just say one more time back on the legal, I would like clarity on the school's obligation. I understand the mandated reporting distinctions, which is one area of the law, but in terms of the education, mandate for the district, cited in the memorandum is California Education Code 212.5 to define sexual harassment. And Julie, this is what you were asking. Sexual harassment in the code is defined as unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, or other verbal, visual, or physical conduct of a sexual nature made by someone from or in the work or educational setting, or under these various conditions. So I do want to understand how a situation like we've heard of works into the program and where the emphasis should be. That, I think, is a fundamental question that I just like to understand.
So it sounds to me from that wording that sexual harassment actually does not include sexual abuse in the family, that's something.
In the educational setting.
Yeah, so the definition of sexual harassment. Now, there could be all sorts of other definitions worked in and, guidance from the department that I don't understand, but I am trying to understand that fundamental
Well, and our
distinction.
board policy is tracking that language,
Yeah.
which is just that language, basically. I mean, that was my question also.
Yeah, no, that's why I was echoing.
So, Carol, is that an easy question that you'd have the ability to address, the legal aspect?
Of sexual harassment?
Jason, do you want to kind of restate?
Yeah.
Get clarification?
Yeah, I was looking at the education code, which is what's cited in the materials that was given to us, of the definition of sexual harassment for the purpose of education. And it seems to refer to harassment, advances, all these things I was saying, made from someone in the workplace or an educational setting, as opposed to in other settings.
Mm-hmm.
And I totally appreciate what you were saying. There's gradation here. There's the play fields, there's all sorts of ways kids are interacting with adults where they can be harmed. But I'm trying to understand the obligation of the program of, where it goes.
Well, I think that the program has three pieces to it. So we talk about child abuse prevention,
Yeah.
we talk about sexual harassment prevention, and we talk about bullying prevention.
So child
So-
abuse is its own, sorry,
Correct.
I'm trying to
Yes.
understand that.
Yes, yes.
So, but from that definition, we're not required to teach about child abuse, we're required to teach about sexual.
That's my question.
That's, if that's your question, that's
Yes.
correct.
Yeah.
Yes, that's
Yes.
correct.
So that's important to know, and it's important to know what is that requirement? What, you mentioned ed code, what was that number again?
It's the one in the memo, it's 212.5, so it defines sexual harassment.
Okay, so if we're required to do that, it seems to me we need to focus on that and how do we satisfy that? And to broaden it isn't necessarily what we need to do as far as my opinion goes.
But I think what you need to do is you need to focus on prevention, and that's what this program does. It focuses on child abuse prevention, sexual harassment prevention, and bullying prevention. So I think it's great that we're going to look at what the law says and what the school needs to do, but you also really you need to take a proactive approach to this and really look at this through the prevention lens and make sure that we are keeping kids safe. If we don't educate our students about these issues, then we're not doing them a good service and we're not preventing these things from happening. We're just not going to do
The
that.
question is if legally all we need to do is sexual harassment training and bullying, I don't even know, bullying prevention.
No,
Part of it,
bullying.
Sexual harassment prevention, you know, are we shifting to the school district an obligation that, you know, for child abuse training, prevention training, that doesn't exist?
Yes, we are.
You know what I'm
I
saying?
think so,
Like,
yes.
like if we're not legally required to provide that, should we? I guess that's the
Especially,
question.
yeah,
Yes,
I
you should.
agree with you, Julie. I think it's a very important question.
Well, I mean, it's just like, you know, as a parent, of course, you're teaching your child, but, you know,
Yeah, I
you know,
think
that
it's a
their
very
bodies is
important.
private and all that good stuff, but.
It is a
I
partnership.
think Marcia's got a little bit of information.
Oh.
I want to just, add, we do have a bullying policy, and we do have requirements to ensure that we do not have bullying taking place in our schools. And so prevention is a big component of that, and teaching students how to recognize bullying, whether they're a victim or a bully themselves, and how to
But
prevent
isn't
that.
that what we do with Think First?
Yes.
We do that,
Yes.
we
Yeah.
do that.
Yes.
But it's been reinforced through this program as well.
Thank you.
And Kathy, if I, you know, like I said, I have a third grader, I don't recall getting a survey, so if that third grade survey has already gone out, has that gone out everywhere? or-
Not yet,
Oh,
no.
okay. I was like, wait a minute, I missed that email.
I just want to say something in response to what you said, Julie. I think that is, what you brought up is exactly what we should all be considering. That, of course, we have to make sure we satisfy the sexual harassment prevention that we're required to do legally, but we have to think about, you know, some of this goes beyond that, and it can cross over to things that are, you know, affecting, you know, your family values when you're talking about new pictures in the home kind of thing. So is that the kind of, you know, there may be other examples. I'm just saying,
Well,
you
I
know.
do think we need to think about what our legal obligation is, and then, you know, I mean,
Right,
obviously,
right.
Mirage comes from a different perspective
Right.
because of
The
what they went through.
situation, yes.
My
You know, and
point
we
is
do
that
have, and there weren't new legal requirements, which is why we went with this program in the first place, so I guess the question is.
My
Well,
point,
and-
though, is that this is not the way to deal with what Moraga went through.
Well, that's for them to decide,
Somebody
but
reported
it's,
abuse to a principal, which is absolutely not okay. You have to report the reported sexual abuse
I
was
know, but
reported.
because of what Moraga went through, I think they're on a more,
Yeah,
they were trying to be very, I don't know, say proactive, or maybe thorough is the right word, you know, we maybe.
yeah. But they also had a committee for a year or so, and with board members on it. I mean, we basically went along with the program that they and Lafayette, you know, came up, I mean, they came up with it after a year-long process of having a safety committee, et cetera, I mean, I looked on their websites, and there was a
Well,
lot
not
of
the took 5 years
information
to
there.
come up with PDK.
Yeah, but I mean, what I'm
3
saying
months,
is,
so.
we as a board, we as a district haven't, you know, haven't hashed through this, and we just have an agreement in front of us. And, you know, I don't think it's fair to us to say, well, because they're doing it, we have to do it, and we have to do exactly the same thing. I mean, we need to think
And
it
then
out
on the flip
also.
side, you know, there's, you know, teaching children, about child abuse prevention is not a bad thing
No,
necessarily.
it's not a bad thing as long as we know we're doing it the way we want to do it. Yeah, we just want to make sure we know we're doing it the way we want to do it, and I'm not convinced, based on the information we have, so.
Kathy?
So this item was up for discussion only tonight, and so, we're bringing it forward because the agreement is due the end of June.
Thank you. Thanks. There's no further discussion, we'll move on. Thank you. Carol,
Thank
thanks
you
for
very
being
much.
here. Appreciate you being here. Thank you, Kathy. And next, we're going to go to item C, Terra Verde, temperature and AC feasibility study. Ed Silvas obviously is not here. Joe, if you want to introduce Rick Brown of Terra Verde.
Yes, Rick Brown from Terra Verde, who we've contracted with to provide us with this type of information he's presented to you before. In the last presentation, the board had requested some additional information around air conditioning, time temperature studies, and the interaction between that and Prop 39. And Rick has been working to prepare responses to this question and provide you with an update. So,
Thank you. Yeah, Rick Brown, Terra Verde. I'm going to quickly go through this PowerPoint. There's some backup materials, a memo, and some other materials in the board packet. If you have any questions about any of that also, I have that loaded up here we can go to. So just a little bit of background in terms of where this journey sort of started. At the October 13th meeting in 2014, we presented the results of our temperature study. We also presented a rough order of magnitude estimate about what it would cost to implement air conditioning at the various sites. And we also presented some initial feasibility analyses of what solar implementation might do for the district in terms of saving on energy costs, either without air conditioning installed or with air conditioning installed. And the reason we did those two versions is because obviously if you add air conditioning to the district's infrastructure, it's going to significantly increase your electricity and energy costs. At that time, the board provided direction to us to update and refine the AC rough order magnitude estimate, with particular attention to questions about would the implementation of those measures trigger the requirement to put in certain fire safety upgrades. That was one of the big questions back then. And to prepare some information for a board facilities workshop, which then occurred on November 13th, where we talked about some of the financial impacts, both capital sources that the district might have and uses, and costs and net savings of all these various projects, including at that point, the Prop 39 projects that we discussed earlier. And then we talked in specific about some of the fire safety issues related to state regulations. And then the next stage in this process was then at the February board meeting, the board approved the agreement with us to move forward with developing a solar project. So tonight, what we want to do is update you on the status of the solar project development and then review some updated information around the AC project. In particular, there was a request that we take the temperature study and do a little bit more fine-grained analysis on a classroom-by-classroom basis of what the results of that were. So let me quickly do the solar project update and then we can get to the AC. We did our engineers did a site walk last, I guess a week and a half ago with Ed to identify what are the potential locations, optimal locations for putting in the primarily shade structure solar facilities. We talked about that at that last meeting. And so we're narrowing down to what those options might be, and that's going to help us refine our cost estimates. But in general, the conclusion of our engineers is that there are a number of very good options, cost-effective options, so we're feeling pretty confident we'll be able to meet that issue. So those locations are under development, and we'll be refining them over the next few weeks. The other thing that came up since the February board meeting is that on March 5th, the federal government released authorization for what's called Clean Renewable Energy Bonds, or CREBs. This is a very low-interest financing opportunity, and since at the February meeting, when we discussed the different financing options, the direction seemed to be away from doing a power purchase agreement and more towards a district ownership model. But under a district ownership model, we also wanted to finance part of that, not have it be all cash, And so we got authorization from the district to submit a application. You're not obligated, but it's a first come, first served program. So we want to get that application in as soon as possible. We should have that completed by the end of this week, and we'll have that submitted after some review with Teresa and Ed and potentially Joe. And then we'll wait and see whether we get that loan. It's a 1% interest, which is obviously very low interest, 20-year term loan. So if we can get into that program, again, you're not obligated, but it gives you an opportunity to finance this at a much lower rate than what we had presented in our previous pro forma, which was more like the 4% at 25 years. So the next steps really is we do need to finalize the project scope as we've talked before, basically in terms of are we sizing the solar to offset load that includes AC or doesn't include AC. We need to finalize the array locations. We need to finalize that financing plan. And then we're pretty much ready to go in terms of releasing an RFP. Ideally, we would do that in the next month or two because there are some policy issues that are sort of marching along that you may have heard about. There's going to be some changes in the way in which solar is counted towards your energy bill called net metering 2.0 that will come into effect after around December 2016. So you want to get your project built and interconnected under net metering 1.0, which is much more beneficial. And in PG&E territory, there's a rate structure called A6, which is very beneficial, but unfortunately PG&E is trying to get rid of it. So again, we think we have about 8 to 12 months, but you want to get in under that rate structure and be grandfathered. So we're going to keep pushing this along, but the idea is to get that RFP out for installation no later than June if we can. So that's the solar, and I can take questions now or just go through the AC piece. How would you like to?
Why don't we do the solar first?
Okay.
Let's do
Questions? Okay.
Any questions from the board on the solar piece?
Well, what's that CREBS about, the Clean Renewable Energy Bond? Can you explain that a little more?
Yeah, it's originally there was the first original Krebs allocation was part of the stimulus bill that came out of in 2009. There was about $3 billion that was authorized. It had to be basically expended by 2011. Some folks did, some folks didn't, and as a result, there was about $500 million left over. The government has sort of sat there with that, and then finally, in March, said, okay, the gates are open, anybody who wants to apply for this can apply for it. The way it basically works is, you actually go out and to the private market, and private entities will basically say, here's what we are willing to lend you money at, and the federal government subsidizes the interest rate on that down to 1%. That's basically how it works. So it's a federally subsidized interest rate.
Can I ask a follow-up on that, Sarah? So, under this application process, is it an all or nothing, or might they give partial financing?
They could, yeah. We're going to apply, we think it's best to apply for the
Yeah,
whole
go for
project
all,
cost, and then you can decide, do you want to take half of it, 3/4, and they may come back and say, well, we're not going to give you their full project cost, we'll give you 60%, we'll give you 70%. That's in the Fed's option. But
And do they have criteria in terms of financial health of the district or anything like that?
this is not one of those,
Just
yeah.
an
It's
adjustment?
not like a Q-SCAB or
Yeah.
or QZAB. No, this is, all comers can come in, it's first come, first served. The only other requirement that I should say is, that I mentioned up there, we're gonna have to do the bond issuance by September. So, that's why we gotta be prepared to move, yeah. If we wanna use this financing.
And I'm getting in on the PG&E rate
Right.
being grandfathered, would we definitely be grandfathered? I mean, should that be?
Under the NEM, the law says you will be grandfathered. Under the PG&E rate, it's more like, we're involved in that proceeding, we're a party to it, and kind of trying to stall PG&E from getting rid of it. And what the lawyers from PG&E have said in trying to settle is they've said, well, we're not gonna screw anybody over. Anybody who's been under A6, we're gonna let them stay under A6. Now that's their way of trying to get the CPUC to agree to get rid of it because they are softening the blow. But the point is, it's not in the law that they have to grandfather it, but there is a political and sort of process that it's very likely that will
And
be the
would we
case.
have to know would we have to know about the size of the project at that point? I mean, would we have to be locked in on whether it was with AC or without AC?
Well, with the A6, you actually have to have the project operating.
So, oh, okay.
Yeah, the project has to be, because you don't get to switch to that rate until you have,
It's up and running.
until it's up and running. So we want to get it up and running by, frankly, December. That's my suggestion.
Wow, okay.
I mean, this project, once we get to this RFP stage, getting the project built and up and running, that moves pretty quick. We can get that built pretty quick.
Well, I have a question that's not solar really, but on the energy efficiency projects that we approved,
Mhm.
are those completed, in process, some of them completed?
So,
Where
so
are we?
actually, I should have introduced, Margaret Hanley in the back here from Terra Verde is your project manager on that, and we are ready to release the RFP to get bids, because remember, under Prop 39, we have to do a bid process. That's gonna go out either end of this week, early next week, so that's where that's at. The funding has been approved by the California Energy Commission, so your funding is approved for all those projects. We have to get them built, and we have to get pricing.
So we haven't seen any savings?
We haven't seen any savings yet on
We
that.
haven't done them
Yeah,
yet.
but we have, in the pro forma that we put together in the solar, we have built in the savings that we project from those measures to do the sizing appropriately. We don't want to oversize around that.
And you'll do that for AC as well?
Right, right. If you do
Oh,
the AC,
He's looking for our guidance.
yeah,
Right.
tonight is
I
one of
know,
those
but
places
that's the
where,
next
you know,
conversation.
we need to, yeah.
But one more question
Sure.
on this, the top thing, the
Yeah.
site walk.
Yeah.
You know, we saw a report last year that had pictures of where the solar could go.
Right.
Are we considering that? I'm also wondering, are we talking about solar panels over the parking lot that provide shade to the cars? What are you?
It's a combination, it's, you know, pretty much, at this point, from talking to our engineers, there really are no good ground mount opportunities. It's really all gonna be shade structures, either over play areas, like asphalt areas where it's really hot, or grass areas next to play areas, so kids have places to sort of retreat, you know, from the heat when they're, you know, in the play areas, or parking structures. But we'll come back, we'll have before we finalize this thing, we're gonna come back with the, you know, RFP and the, you know, array locations, all that kind of stuff. We're gonna have to, Ed and we are gonna have to sit down with the principals, go through, you know,
Yeah.
tweak that, and so.
Yeah, I think parking lots would be easier. The reaction I had when you said over blacktop is balls, you know, if you're
Yeah.
playing ball.
Honestly, it actually is okay. We've been doing that with schools for actually now 3 years, and you'd be surprised, it actually works out okay. In fact, we've had schools who said, oh my gosh, you know,
All control.
the kids are gonna run into the poles.
Mhm.
Everybody is so happy with it,
Yeah.
because they get shade in areas that.
Shade structure.
Yeah.
instead
It
of
means that
fine
play
shade
areas get
structure.
used that don't get used,
Yeah.
because they have that
I
retreat.
can see that.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Anything else on the solar? So, yeah, the one outstanding item here, we're cranking ahead, but the one outstanding item is really is whether we're gonna scope it to the AC.
AC,
Yeah.
yeah.
So since we took this piece by piece, are there any public comments
Yes.
on the,
Charles
on the
Shanley,
solar
President.
project?
On the solar project, yes, I'm clear on that, thanks, Matt. Being that we're in neighborhoods, I'm wondering if there was a neighborhood study piece where neighbors would be able to give input, considering that they wanna maintain their property values. And, you know, it'd be nice for them to see some pictures of what it's gonna look like as they look out their front.
I think, yeah, as part, I should have said, when I said meeting with principals, it really should be, you know, our general practice is, we talk to the principal or whoever the administrative person is and say, how would you like to review this with your community? And, yeah, we can do that. In fact, just so to be clear, property values historically go up as solar gets put into those communities, so.
Thank you.
It's just one of those little known things, yeah.
And I'm sorry, I wasn't expecting a response, I wasn't asking for him to respond to me, but
No, but
that was
it's
icing on the cake, thank you.
It's a good question.
I don't wanna get in trouble.
The first time that didn't happen, it was a problem, yeah.
So that makes me think of a question. Is there an issue, if you have solar panel down below at a school site and a home up above, is there glare issues or anything? Do they ever complain?
That's one of the things that actually in the putting together the project specifications and so forth, we actually include that there has to be some kind of glare analysis to prove that that's not gonna happen. It has happened, it
Okay.
can happen, so that's why, as part of the project development, you have to
Does it
include
depend
that.
on the angle or the?
Right, it's the angle and the
surface?
distance and, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Anything else on solar? Okay, let's move on.
Okay, so there is gonna be a little bit, when we do the summary, integrating, as you know, with the solar, but I wanted to just get to that point. So, temperature study update. So as you remember, we did this temperature study. We came up with the conclusion, and we gave you the report that said, frankly, you're looking at potentially as much as 2/3 of the year without AC as we go into the future, given historical and future trends around ambient temperature, outside temperature, that you're likely to see in most campuses, in all campuses, anywhere from half to 2/3 of the year having classrooms at least some time of the day being above the standard, what's called the ASHRAE standard for comfort, which is between 67 and 74 degrees. So that was something that I think people intuitively had some sense of, but we had the data. And what we were requested back in the fall was, well, can we break that down into a little bit more granular, like take each of the individual subset of classrooms at each of the campuses and see, are there certain places on the campuses where it's more or less, right? And so we provided you with that data in the report you should have in the packet. And basically, the findings show that, that 20 of the 43 room clusters are still going to exceed that ASHRAE standard 80 school days per year. So not a half, but at least 40%. And that, but for 2 or 3 classrooms at a couple sites, even the coolest classrooms, even the coolest clusters are going to exceed that ASHRAE standard approximately 60 school days per year, or about 1/3 of the school year. So no, it's not quite as all-encompassing as the overall study. There are going to be some classrooms where, yes, it'll be okay for 120 out of 180 days, but there's still going to be, even in the coolest classrooms, but for a couple of exceptions of the 43, they're all going to be at least 60 days where they're over that standard. So that was, I think, the request that we got to give you that more detailed information. Now, what does that mean in terms of what the scope of the project should be? That really is more of a policy kind of question. I mean, you have to decide as a policy body, are we comfortable having certain groups of classrooms have that level of, heat level above a certain standard versus other classrooms that are, do have a cooling opportunity. But the ASHRAE standard of 67 to 74, again, by the way, it's not a law. There's no legal requirement that says you have to be within that standard, but that standard was developed to basically say, to have a well-functioning classroom, you need to try to keep it within that range for the bulk of the school year. So that's kind of the basic issue. This sheet I know is hard to read for everybody else, but it's the same information we presented earlier. The only thing I would say now is, if we had gone forward, maybe as late as January, maybe we could have gotten through the exception process for the fire safety upgrade for OIS. I mean, if you remember, we did this investigation to see, based on what equipment is currently in place, can we avoid the trigger of having to go to the next level standard? And the only site where that, based on our evaluation, the only site where that was a possibility was OIS, based on the fire equipment that's in place right now. Given where we are in the year, it's not going to happen. We would not be able to avoid having to do that fire safety equipment upgrade, because July 1st is the absolute deadline for submitting plans to ask for that exception. And it's, I've talked to a bunch of different firms. It's pretty unlikely you'd be able to, even if you decided tonight to go forward, to be able to get under that gate. And frankly, you have to ask yourself the question, do you really want to have 4 schools that are at one standard and another school at a very lower standard? I mean, again, that's a policy issue, but
we probably wouldn't, but I'm just curious, why was OIS different?
Because they have certain equipment in place that could, and it's not, and I have to say could, because I've talked to a number of engineers. Some engineers said it's not going to happen. Some said, well, it could pass the exception rule because of the level of most of the communications equipment that's in place there that isn't at the other sites. So it isn't even a slam dunk that you could have gotten the exception. You could have applied for it, but we don't have, DSA has that discretion, and there were some who felt that you would get it and some who felt you wouldn't, so. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. So this summary basically shows sources, uses, and savings all in one place. So there's 5 columns. The first column is the air conditioning project. Again, the rough order of magnitude capital cost is $8.226 million. That's just a summary of what we saw on the previous page. And then we have the 4 scenarios for if you went ahead with the solar project under those different financing scenarios, what those capital requirements would be and what the savings would be. So we continue to include the PPA just for illustrative purposes. This is one where you don't have to expend any capital. You have a third party who owns and operates the system. They take the tax credit that helps with the rate that they offer you in terms of what you pay for power. We estimate that you would be able to get somewhere in the neighborhood of $70,000 a year in savings in year 1, and then that just goes up, not as savings, but as avoided costs as PG&E rates go up and the power purchase agreement rate goes up at a lower rate. $408,000 after 5 years and $3.7 million after 25 years. Now, if we got the CREB financing, the next slide over, we just put together a scenario here of where the district put in 40% cash for the construction of the project and use 60% debt. We can do a 20/80, we can do a 10/90, we can do a 50/50. We just wanted to give you some basis. That would require about $1.8 million in cash. Again, based on an estimate total project cost of about $4.5 million. And then the other being financed, so you take the total capital required for the AC project, the capital required, the cash capital required for the Krebs scenario, and you get a $10 million hit in terms of the capital cost. The savings are higher than the PPA because, again, the effective borrowing rate is lower under the Krebs than under a PPA scenario where a third party is a private investor. They can't get the tax rates that a CREB would provide. So you see $108,000 in year 1, $638 year 5, and $6.4 million after 25 years. Now the next scenario is the same exact one as the Krebs, except we're doing a COP. Now you might ask yourself, why is the savings in year 1 under the Krebs $108,000 versus the COP $170,000? And it comes down to the fact that under the Krebs, you have to do a straight line amortization. You can't sculpt your amortization schedule. So you have to, one of the rules is same amount every year. Whereas under a COP, you do have the option of actually sculpting that amortization schedule. In other words, paying less towards the financing in those early years. And we just gave you, we did this as an example. We could do a straight line and show you what the apples to apples would be, and then the Krebs would look better. But if you were going to do a COP, most of our clients who do that sculpting because they want to get some of those early savings in those early years. But as you can see, after 5 years, it definitely almost catches up, and clearly after 25 years, the Krebs savings are significantly higher because your financing costs are significantly lower. And then the 4th column, which is if we could wave a magic wand and we had all the cash in the world, if you completely just effectively capitalize this operating cost, right, about $250,000 a year, you'd save $250,000 a year in your energy costs, and that would, you see where that adds up over the 5 years and over the 25 years. So this kind of gives you the summary of how it all plays together. Next steps, again, await decision on Krebs, as we said, develop the array locations with the various inputs, finalize the scope options, we talked about that. And with the AC, consider whether you want to move forward with the full development of the AC project. And that's that.
Going back to that chart, the last one you showed. So on the estimated year 1 savings, we did all cash.
Right.
I thought our electricity bill was like $200,000 a year, so isn't that showing? This is a couple of years.
Yeah, no, this is based on, I will. I can bring it
And
up
would
here.
it be offsetting 100% of your?
You'd be offsetting 100% of your bill, and it is about, as
And
of,
if we do the energy efficiency savings, would that be bringing down our bill?
it would, but again, that's with the AC project. So your energy bill is gonna go up.
So that's incorporating the AC?
Right, yeah,
All
I'm
these
sorry.
estimates are
I
full
used,
AC.
all these are assuming the AC. You're right, it would be less, the savings would be less if you didn't do the AC. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Can I ask a question about the study?
Yeah.
I want to thank you for doing this because I remember the prior conversation about understanding what's going on in the classrooms.
Right.
And these charts, particularly on 14, 15,
Right.
looking at each of the schools,
Kind of
really
give you a
gives you a
flavor.
good sense.
Yeah.
And I appreciate what you said, is we're drawing a line here.
Right.
And that is a policy decision
Right.
that you've given us a bandwidth for, and we've heard from teachers and parents and others what they're experiencing in the classroom. But I see a lot of differentiation. So here are my two questions for you. It sounds like from your report that our other strategies have not worked. Fans clearly have not worked.
No.
You know, windows aren't working. You're
Right.
seeing sort of, it was mentioned earlier that windows haven't been replaced yet, but how much room do we have here on strategies
Yeah.
that can help?
To
in
do
some of
cool,
these
yeah,
cases?
double pane windows unfortunately really don't do much around cooling. They just, they don't
They
help.
insulate in, but they don't.
Right, yeah. So really, it becomes, you know, I mean, you could potentially, you know, try to get more, you know, fan energy in there. If this was on the margin, I would say that's something to work. You're not on the margin here. This is, yeah, that's the problem.
Which I get that. So
Yeah.
there, some of them, it might make a difference that are closer
Yeah.
to the margin.
Right.
Then there's a differentiation, so that's the second question. I
Right.
think at the end of the last policy discussion we were having, we were trying to figure out if there were options,
Right.
right? That you do some but not all.
Right.
After all, the schools already are partially air conditioned, because there were units that had air conditioning or
Right,
not.
that's right.
Um,
The portables. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Is that something you can scope? You can give us gradations and models for? Is that
In terms of
unrealistic?
cost.
Is the overhead such that once you're doing it, you know,
Well,
go ahead and do other classrooms?
Yeah, that's good. The fixed cost that you can't get rid of is that fire safety upgrade. Once
Yeah.
you do any of this stuff,
You got it.
that number's in there, right?
Okay.
So that's a big chunk. There are obviously design costs that, again,
Fixed.
you're not gonna, really where it comes down to is the number of units that you put in. And we can certainly, you know, if you said to us, we're okay with, you know, 50 days a year, and we'll work with fans and other things to, you know, classrooms that are gonna be at that 50 level, we're okay with. But anything above that, we wanna cool off. We can come back and say, okay, you can see the number of units that we can take out of the project. We know what those costs per unit are, and come back to you with a rough order of magnitude for what that cost would be. So yes, we can offer those other scenarios, but it requires that scoping